I'm Barry Bailey, and I appreciate so much getting to visit with you again this morning. This is the second part of a talk that I just finished some time ago, and I want to continue dealing with the life of Jesus. Jesus, in his teaching, his ministry, one of the most significant things he did was to tell parables. And we look at these as stories, but they're much more than that. They have so many facets to them. You can almost say that every time you read them, you can learn something else. That's the way it is with a great parable. You don't exhaust it. It may wear you out in terms of trying to handle it. As an example, one day Jesus made the statement, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Now think about that. That is assuming that you have the right attitude towards yourself. I know some people who look at themselves in such a way, I don't want them to treat me like they see themselves. If you have a poor self-image or whatever else, this is assuming you care for yourself properly. Love your enemy as you love yourself. He didn't say love your friend like that. This is a person you don't like or doesn't like you. You're not getting along. Care for your enemy as you care for yourself. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And then someone asked an obvious question. Who is my neighbor? Well, I imagine he was expecting to hear the person next door or whatever else, somebody geographically close to you. And then Jesus told a story which really means there's no limit to the dimension. Your neighbor is anyone you know that hurts. Think of that. We're inclined to help people that don't need it. Growing up in Arkansas, I remember when we'd have a shower for a young girl that was getting married, they almost gave her gifts depending upon her economic status. If she didn't have much, they didn't spend a lot on the gift. If she had a lot, they gave her a more expensive gift. Wasn't that silly? You kind of allowed it just the opposite of the way it seems to me it should be. I could fall in the same category. I probably have. At any rate, who is my neighbor, this man asked. And Jesus tells a story called the Good Samaritan. I'm not being politically correct. I'm being honest when I say the Jew despised the Samaritan for whatever the reason. Maybe they were considered not a full race, or somebody could say colloquially a half-breed, or whatever reason. The Samaritans and the Jews did not get along well. And so here's a story where a man is beaten up, left for half dead, and the religious people go by. Let us say the preachers go by. The deacon of your church, the president of the Women's Society, good, decent people go by and don't help the poor soul beaten up. Now who comes to help him? Of all things, the Samaritans. Now, since you happen not to know a Samaritan, you'd have to break this down and decide, who do you not like? An African American? Native American? Someone who's obese? Maybe an Irishman? White? Whatever. There's somebody you don't like. Don't kid yourself. There's somebody you don't get along with. And that's the person that's the hero of this story. That person you really don't care for at all. Now, you don't want to be caught caring. If Jesus is going back a second time, which he never will, but if Jesus is going to appear, you want to have your arm around your enemy. You really want to look sweet. We're all like that. But who is the hero? Well, it happens to be the person that just goads you to death. The person that drives you up the wall. He comes in and does the right thing which you didn't do. You don't like that story, do you? You know what's going to happen? You're not going to like the storyteller either, because that really upsets you. That storyteller, who happens to be Jesus, just made you angry. And Jesus tells a story. Do you think he was popular for telling that? But he told the truth. A fact and a truth. Do you know they don't have to be the same? Hitler was a fact, but he wasn't the truth. The story of the prodigal son is true. It may not have been a fact. Who is my neighbor? And Jesus tells the story. Your neighbor is the person that needs you. You really never outgrow that. You spend the rest of your life, in a sense, trying to be neighborly. Oddly enough, there's a time when you're the one that needs someone to be your neighbor. There's a statement where it says, inasmuch as you do it to the least of these. For a large part of my life, I always thought of somebody else as being the least of these. Somebody unemployed, somebody with various kinds of problems that were noticeable. I never really saw myself as the least of these. You live long enough and you get to be the least of these. I don't care what you have. One day you have cancer. What you want the most and cannot get makes you the least of these. You want a job and you can't get it. You want good health and you can't have it. You want to love someone that you love and that person doesn't love you. Whatever you want that you can't get, you've joined the least of these. So when you hear this, that's not talking about someone else, it's talking about you. Right now there's some things that you can't handle. Well, you've joined the club of the least of these. We usually see ourselves on top, helping someone beneath us. And one day you join them, you realize you cannot get what you want so desperately. Who is your neighbor? Somebody in need. That opens up a whole new world. And the person that's the hero here is the person you don't like. He outshines you. He's better than you here. Jesus got crucified for a lot of reasons. God didn't bring about the crucifixion of Jesus. When Jesus is in the garden and saying, if it's possible, let this cup pass from me, but nevertheless thy will, it wasn't God's will for Jesus to be crucified. The will of God was for Jesus to explain the truth. He that has seen me has seen the Father. Jesus isn't saying that he's God. Jesus, in loving people, is saying God's like I am. You don't have a bad God and a good Jesus. You've got a man who's smart as all get out. Jesus explaining the nature of the unknown God. I don't know how he could have been much more clear. Oh, he got crucified for a lot of reasons. But one day when he walked in the temple and turned the tables over in the temple, you know what that was doing? That was destroying their financial setup. He went to Wall Street and shook it around. He went to Lockheed Martin and closed it down. Pick where you're working. He hit them in the pocketbook. The largest employer in Jerusalem was the temple, where you came and bought animals and they sold them to you at an exorbitant price. You offered them to God to get God to take you back. Jesus turns the table over and says, stop. You don't buy God. You don't need these sacrifices. You don't need these animals. If Jesus is saying you don't need a sacrifice, isn't it odd that we use Jesus as a sacrifice to get God to take us back when he turns the tables over? No, that's why he got crucified. You don't like him either when he upsets you. Jesus turned the tables over. He hit them in the pocketbook. Now they arrest him in the garden. How we mistreat Judas here. We say Judas is so bad he betrayed Jesus. Well, he got 30 pieces of silver from the priest to have Jesus there crucified. But he didn't want to have him crucified. Look what happens. I think he was trying to make Jesus lead an army. We've got to have somebody to defend us against Rome. We can't get by just with this. Like someone said, if the meek are going to inherit the earth, they've got to become more aggressive. Well, here's Judas when he realizes, my Lord, Jesus is practicing what he preaches. He's not going to resist them. He could do it. He's smart. He's strong. Well, he's arrested. Judas goes back and tries to give him the 30 pieces of silver, which was the price for a slave about that time. That's really what it's symbolic of. They wouldn't take it. Judas throws it on the floor and takes his own life. Don't you realize the man didn't get what he wanted? He wasn't trying to betray Jesus. And all across the years, you talk about how well you read the Bible, you believe every word in it, well, you must not. It's obvious here in the story. Let it say what it says. Judas committed suicide because he was so distraught that he had betrayed the man that he loved so much, because he thought Jesus would lead an army. And Jesus didn't. And he goes to the cross and is crucified. And Jesus died and he's dead. There's no physical resurrection. You're trying to prove your faith. If the only reason you believe in the teachings of Jesus is because a physical body raised up from the dead can walk around and prepare breakfast for the disciples, you don't believe in the teachings of Jesus. You're not living by faith. You're trying to live by proof. God proved to me the truth and I'll love my neighbor. God let me see the truth. Well, you're not taking a risk. Get out there and take a risk. What if there's no reward? No reward whatsoever. What about trying to be meek and teachable? What about trying to be nice and lovable? What about trying to do the right thing? You don't get any reward in the world. What about doing right because it's right? You have to be guaranteed heaven before you're going to try to do what's right? We've got enough problems just looking at the situations as they are. Would it be so bad if you decided to be ethical and have integrity, and you lose, and you have integrity? Nobody likes you much, but you try to do what's right, you have integrity? Would that be so bad? That's exactly what happened to Jesus. But may I say very quickly, while I don't believe in the physical resurrection, there's something about a presence that's there. There's a time when you feel the presence of the Holy Spirit. There's a time you feel the presence of Jesus. For you to feel the presence of someone that's died, that person that's dead doesn't have to be aware of your presence. It's your creative mind that erases time so you can feel the presence of someone that's died. That person's dead and may not be able to feel your presence, but you can feel it. We learn from each other. So in this accumulation of things, there's a time when you see Jesus as a young man going to the cross, and he says very clearly on the cross that you cannot make me hate. God, forgive them for what they do. And I think the real resurrection is one thing. You cannot destroy goodness. And Jesus hanging on the cross proves no matter what you do to me, you cannot destroy goodness. And in doing so, what Jesus is saying is, and God is like I'm trying to show you by what I do. I appreciate so very much you're watching this.